So welcome, everybody. Thank you for making the time to join this very important session, this webinar. We have an esteemed panel today that I'll introduce shortly. This webinar today is called Starting a Healthcare Business in Ghana, a Conversation with HeFRA. So we have a healthcare business owner on our panel who resides right here in the US. He is one of our very own members and is in the process of completing his facility in Ghana. And then we also have on our panel a Ghana-based healthcare business owner who opened his facility nearly 30 years ago. That's a big deal. Each of them will share their experience starting their healthcare business in Ghana, and then we'll have the registrar of HeFRA share his expertise on the regulatory body that governs healthcare facilities in Ghana. The session will be moderated by our very own Director of GCPS, Professor Richard Adenu. Thank you for your partnership in putting this webinar together, sir. So after all three speakers, we'll open it up for questions. So please feel free to place your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of them as possible before the end of our time today. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Dr. Collins Kwarteng. He is a board-certified interventional cardiologist with board certifications in internal medicine, echocardiography, nuclear cardiology, and general as well as interventional cardiology, with special emphasis on acute heart attack interventions and complex high-risk cardiac and peripheral arteriovenous interventions. He does quite a bit. He received his start at the University of Ghana, where he studied Greek history, Greek literature, philosophy, and geography. You'll hear about his journey to medicine one day. After he migrated to the United States in 1995, he decided to pursue medicine. Without money for medical school, he signed up for the US Army and served 4 years of active duty and 4 years of reserve duty. Thank you for your service, sir. His undergraduate degree after his military service was from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and his medical degree was obtained from the University of Massachusetts, Worcester. He completed his internal medicine residency at Emory University right here in good old Atlanta, Georgia, cardiology fellowship at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Beverly Hills, California. His interventional cardiology and structural heart disease fellowship was at the University of Miami in South Beach. He's the owner of the City of Hope Heart and Vascular Center in Dublin, Georgia, and the owner and CEO of the City of Hope Hospital and Cardiovascular Center in Ghana. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Next on our panel, we have Dr. Edem Kojo-Hayaje. He is the founder, CEO, and medical director of Lister Hospital and Fertility Center. He graduated from the University of Ghana Medical School in 1982 and went on to further his studies at the University of Glasgow and Queen Mother's Hospital in Glasgow, Scotland, from 1990 to 1993, where he solidified his specialization in obstetrics and gynecology. His commitment to excellence is underscored by prestigious fellowships, including the West African College of Surgeons in 1996 and the World College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in 2005. In 1995, Dr. Hayaje founded Lister Hospital, which has since become a beacon of quality healthcare in Ghana, particularly in obstetrics, gynecology, and fertility services. His visionary leadership has propelled the hospital's evolution, setting the standard for quality healthcare delivery. His quest for innovation and effort to bridge the gap between available treatment options and required needs led to his hospital providing the first case of pre-implantation genetic exclusion of sickle cell disease through IVF in 2020. That is a huge feat. He spearheaded the formation of the Fertility Society of Ghana, and under his presidency, garnered international support to develop the curriculum for subspecialty training in reproductive endocrinology and fertility, which was approved by the Ghana College and is ongoing. The first set of locally trained fertility specialists were certified just a few months ago in September 2024. Internationally, Dr. Haije has affiliations with esteemed medical organizations such as the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology, and the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. He's a foundation member of the Board of African Federation Fertility Societies, where he contributes to advancing reproductive health care globally. His research publications, including an audit on the prevalence of bloodborne viruses and IVF, showcase his dedication to advancing scientific knowledge in reproductive medicine. His participation in international conferences organized by Merck Foundation, FIGO, and ESHRE reflects his commitment to staying at the forefront of medical advancements. Dr. Edem Kojo Hayaji continues to shape the landscape of women's health and fertility care in Ghana and beyond. His legacy as a visionary leader, compassionate healthcare provider, and advocate for comprehensive reproductive healthcare has firmly established his reputation in the healthcare space. His journey from a dedicated medical student to a globally recognized fertility specialist serves as an inspiration for aspiring healthcare professionals and a testament to the transformative power of commitment and expertise in the service of others. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Dr. Philip Banner. He is the registrar of the Health Facilities Regulatory Agency. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Banner and his lovely wife last week at the GMA conference dinner dance. It was such a pleasure to meet him in person. He's a board-certified internal medicine specialist and has been practicing since 2001. He's a graduate of the Medical College of Wisconsin and completed specialty training at the Medical College of Wisconsin affiliated hospitals. Dr. Banner has a Master of Science in Renal Medicine from the University of South Wales and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Western Illinois University. Select achievements include being a fellow of Korea Foundation for International Health in 2018, an Essentials of Business Administration certificate from London School of Economics and Politics in 2019, a Global Business Leadership certificate from Oxford University School of Business in 2020, and a World Health Organization leadership recognition in 2022. Under his leadership, HeFRA has won international and national awards for standardization of inspection and monitoring of facilities. In December 2023, the African Public Service Optimum Awards recognized Dr. Banner and HeFRA for excellence in leadership in health facility regulation. Other achievements include the adoption of over 34 new facility standards for license and accreditation, signing of a memorandum of understanding between the Pharmacy Council and HeFRA to reduce regulatory burden. Prior to his appointment to HeFRA, Dr. Banner was the director of the e-claims unit at the National Health Insurance Authority. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Banner. I am now going to pass this off to Professor Richard Adenu to take it over as a moderator.
Right, thank you, and welcome to all of you to this webinar. This is a partnership between the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons and the Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation. And this is the second in our webinar series, and we're going to try to keep this up and get this going quarterly. And this is also to let you all know of the annual meeting that GPSF has. And for those of you who are in North America, and even those who are in Ghana, I mean, at the end, Fran will be talking about the annual meeting, and we'd like as many of you as possible to be a part of it. We really got to build this this partnership. And I think we also have some people who are from the Ghana Doctors and Dentists Association in the UK who are with us, so that all we Ghanaians on this 3 continents would kind of like join hands together and get the best for our people. So with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Collins Kwarteng, who would tell us about his story in being able to set up a medical facility in Ghana. So we'll all turn our videos off now, and Dr. Kwarteng will be the only one on, and he would do this for the next 20 or so minutes. So Dr. Kwarteng, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. And thank you, Fran. Good afternoon, wherever you may be. As you may have heard, from the stellar introduction by Dr. Baye. I am Dr. Collins Porter, and I am an interventional cardiologist by trade. But I didn't get here uh, wanting or trying to be an interventional cardiologist. I wanted to be a physician, but that calling came sometime down the line. I'll give you a little bit of my background, my upbringing. I was born to, you could say, middle class family back in Ghana. Um, I was actually born in HeFRA region to a dad who did not have any formal education and to a mother who had sort of semi-formal education. My mother was a people teacher. She trained at Agogo Training College. Um, I grew up mostly in HeFRA until I was 13 when I passed my common entrance examination to go to secondary school. I was one of the youngest to start secondary school at TIM Media Secondary School, right behind the Kumasi Sports Stadium. So I did Form 1 to Form 5 at Amas, real Amas. And then, although I got good O-level grades, I didn't have the financial support to go to sixth form right away. And I really didn't have any role models to lead me um, to get a good sort of sixth form. And so I sat home for 1 year, and then finally, through my own hustling, I got into West Africa Secondary School for lower six and upper six um, in the 1991 year. I did economics and I think general studies and government. I did my national service back in Brunhaf region, and then finally made it to Legon. As you know, you may have seen the trend. If you don't have the support or some role models to hold your hand, things tend to get very difficult. So despite good grades, I was given subjects to read. It wasn't something that I wanted, but the subjects I was given were Greek history. And for those who were in Legon at that time, Greek history and Greek literature, a professor called Shadow. So I was one of Shadow's pupils, also Professor Champon, philosophy, with Ajua Kambu, a white lady who used to teach philosophy. So that is how my beginning started. But my ascension or my, move to medicine was planted by an experience I had back in Kwapon. That is where I did my national service. And I'll make it very brief because it will help you understand where this passion was initially planted. We were playing soccer one afternoon, and I was the science teacher at a primary school in Kwapon, national service. There were 4 guys. So we were playing soccer, and we see a lot of people running towards one area. Kwapon probably is a place for less than 500 people in the village. And as we got to where the occasion was, it was a young kid who had, as I know now, had a syncopal episode. He was essentially lifeless. And as we saw the event, almost instantaneously, all my colleagues, all the national service people turned towards me, looking at me for direction. And I'm also looking at them thinking, why are you all looking at me for? And then they go, but you are the science teacher, so we expect you to know more. I had no idea what was going on then. Now, because we were national service kids, essentially 19, I had seen coming from Accra, I lived in Accra at that time. So coming from Accra, I had seen some movies where in the movies it appeared that somebody had passed away, and somebody was pressing on their chest. I have come to know now that that was CPR, but at that time I had no idea. And so without any sort of purpose, I took charge of the situation and I started pressing on the kid's chest without any rhythm. I had no idea. It was just acting from memory. And a few minutes later, the kid moved and eventually I regained consciousness. He turned out to be the only kid to the lady, to the mother. On the last day in the village, after our national service was done, that woman approached us as we were leaving the lorry station to say that, God put people in different places for different reasons. He was my only son, and I think you being here was probably the only reason my son is still alive. You were a blessing to me and never stop being a blessing onto people. Now, this is after national service before I left for Legon. And so I come to Legon and I'm doing Greek history. But that's prophecy, if you believe in that, that was sold in me by a woman that I didn't know from a hole in the wall, kept eating at me. And so, despite reading philosophy and geography, it was something that was still eating at me. So, when I had the opportunity during the Aluta in 1995 to migrate to the States, my mother sat me down. My mother had been living in New York City. She sat me down and said, "Young man, in this country, you can achieve whatever you want if you put yourself to it." And so I decided to pursue medicine because that prophecy that lady sowed in me continued to eat at me. Unfortunately, my mother was quote unquote undocumented at that time, and we didn't have the money. And so one day I'm in the subway and I met a US Army recruiter who sold me on the idea of potentially joining the United States Army so that they would pay for my education. And if my thought or plan was to pursue medicine, then I could become a combat medic to learn how to play a doctor in the battlefield. And I was so determined at that time to pursue medicine. And so I jumped on that opportunity and signed up 8 years of my life to serve the US Army as a combat medic. And then after I did my 4 years of active duty, came back to the stateside. My first assignment was in South Korea. Came back to the stateside for the 101st Airborne Division in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. From there, I got the opportunity, an early drop, we call it in the Army, got an admission to UMass Boston. My family at that time had migrated from New York City to Worcester, Massachusetts. And so I went to UMass Boston, which was 45 minutes west of Boston. UMass Boston, west of Worcester, to do my undergrad and then eventually to med school. I didn't start medical school until I was 32 years old. But then that prophecy was taking shape. I spoke to my advisors as to what I could do to pursue the type of medicine that would put me in a position to be able to save lives. And I remember my advisor sitting me down and telling me, well, if you really want to do that, then the pinnacle of medicine is interventional cardiology because they have the ability to be essentially able to bring people back to life. And I didn't know about cardiology then. But from that time on, I poured all myself into being an interventional cardiologist. I got my undergrad there, medical school, and then residency at Emory University. But the idea of going back to serve started taking shape when WhatsApp became the thing that people did to try and collaborate. And so I've been on many platforms from way back. And what we heard was how medicine really, really needed help back home in Ghana. My personal families had lost their lives. Members of my family had lost their lives due to adequate medical care or timely intervention. The idea of doing medicine or building a hospital, a healthcare facility back in Ghana had always been there once I got into residency and fellowship. As a matter of fact, I went back and purchased over 50 acres of land at Dodua because my vision was that having been blessed to be in this position, yes, I didn't get anything growing up, but I was so determined to go back home and help, that I put my investments in that. And I started looking for opportunities and collaborations to go back to do that. But I realized everywhere I went, the Exim Bank, AD, African Development Bank, every single place I'll go to try and present my business plan and my idea of wanting to go back, the general theme was we do not want to put money in a place like that. And so at some point, I almost ended up giving up because I didn't think there was any hope. But that idea was still there. And so once I became an attendant, 15 straight years of schooling from undergrad, pre-med, medical school residency, general fellowship, and interventional fellowship. I then went into employed position, first job in Las Vegas. And I noticed that it wasn't something that will put me in a position to be able to do that. So I left employed position and went into private practice. And then from private practice, unfortunately, my son got ill, and I decided to do contract medicine to be able to um, to be able to be in a position financially. Now, initially, the plan was to develop my 50-acre land, but the plans I had was quite extravagant and expensive. You would call it overly ambitious. And so I looked for multiple opportunities around town and also looked for possible collaborations with others to try and do this. And those who have known me know that I've been wanting to collaborate to do something in Ghana for a very long time. So I decided that instead of going up at a very high scale, I will put my resources in a very controlled environment. So fortunately, an opportunity came because everybody in my family knew that my plan was to relocate back home. A couple of family friends had suffered acute MIs and subsequently passed away because of the lack of emergency. I'm sorry, because I have to respond to the emergency room. And so that was why I apologize. Some close family members had lost their lives because of acute MIs. And so I decided that I didn't want to wait until I was semi-retired from here. And so I made a commitment. I sat down with the family, made a commitment to go back home to do this. And so fortunately found a facility in the Ridge area, secured the facility, and decided to build a good state-of-the-art healthcare facility or provide state-of-the-art services to be able to help. And to do that, we decided to get into specialty care. Initially, we thought of a broad idea of doing multi-specialty care, but due to the financial burden pulling that off, we decided to focus our attention to building a cardiac and neurocare, acute cardiac and neurocare. And so that's what we decided to do. So what we have right at 19 Bostal Avenue, down from Tang Palace Hotel and not too far from the former MedLab building, is we have now a 50-bed facility, which is under construction as we speak, that has on-site oxygen plants that has the ability, or that is going to be producing about 50 cubic meters of oxygen, enough for our facility, and be able to also support other facilities around town, and also patients who need home oxygen. We have about 35 general purpose beds, about 15 step-down beds, and about 10 ICU beds. The facility also will boast of an inpatient laboratory services that will serve both our inpatient patients and our outpatient customers. We will have pharmacy lab, MRI, CT, a standard operating room, X-ray, and cardiac diagnostic services. We also have ambulance services that will be able to, that will be dedicated to our patients, and will also support the general community as well. Now, to be able to, I know the purpose of this is how to set that up in Ghana. The situation in Ghana has some regulations that any potential investor has to know about. Now, I know that Dr. Bano is here. Dr. Bano is the boss of HeFRA, so I'm not going to try and speak to that. I will speak to what we had to go through to be able to do that. And I'm sure Dr. Bano will also maybe clarify some areas that I might not know. So for anybody who wants to build a healthcare facility, apart from just getting your land, there are certain regulations you must know about. HeFRA, which is the agency, the regulatory agency responsible for accrediting people or facilities to provide both public service level care as well as private level care. You need to meet their standards, and I'll tell you what HeFRA requires. And I know Dr. Bano is here. Now, obviously, to be able to do any type of business in Ghana, you need to have a legit business. So you need to go to the Registrar General's register a legitimate business. There are requirements that a healthcare business will need to meet at the Registrar General's level. Now, when you go to HeFRA, HeFRA will require that. The reason I started from the Registrar General is because I want you to get your ducks in order before you present yourself to HeFRA, because that is what they are going to demand of you. And I'm happy to share after the meeting these regulations in a PowerPoint presentation. So apart from your business certification, there are certain requirements when you fill the form at HeFRA. You have to have a practitioner who is going to be in charge. That is the healthcare provider whose license the institution or the facility is going to be operated under. Now, that means their complete educational background with verifiable information. Obviously, you have to, now, Dr. Bano may shed some more light on this, but I'm a dual citizen, and so I'm a Ghanaian American. And because of that, I do not know what the current regulations are for somebody who is a non-citizen, and maybe he will be able to share. Now, you also have to have a medical license to be able to practice medicine. And I have to pause here to really thank the GPSF leadership who came before the current administration, from Dr. Usu Yao to Dr. Letitia Otridakon to Dr. Theodora Finn, Kwame Boachi, Eno, Beta Ayi, Gabriel, and then Fran. These leaders were the ones who knocked on the door. Obviously, all of this would not have been possible if I didn't have the right or ability to practice medicine in Ghana. When I started looking into this, I was told that I could practice under somebody else's license. And when I tried, I realized some of them were let me just leave it this way. It just was not possible. And so the only way this whole operation became actualized was because our GPSF leadership, who had been knocking on the door, finally were able to have a memorandum of understanding with the current leadership at the Medical and Dental Council, Ghana physicians and surgeons, the counterpart in Ghana, to be able to allow US trained doctors to be able to attain or obtain licenses in Ghana. I cannot stress that enough. I was not going to put millions of dollars in Ghana if I could not practice medicine in Ghana. And so, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of any potential healthcare entrepreneur who lives across the pond who wants to go to Ghana and practice, this is what made it possible. I couldn't have imagined myself doing this investment, and it's a huge undertaking if I didn't have the ability to practice in Ghana. So that is what made it possible. And I think we need to give thanks to the people who helped make it possible. Now, once you download the application, apart from getting your medical license, you need to have an environmental impact assessment plan. That means you need to go to the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They need to come to your chosen site, your facility, to do an assessment as to how your facility is going to impact the people around you and also the environment. You have to have your layout ready because that is what HeFRA is going to require, because certain places are not zoned for commercial activity. It may be residential. And so it may not be possible. So before you decide to put even one penny in, I need you to consider getting all of these things in order so that you are able to sort of meet the regulatory requirement that HeFRA must uphold to allow your facility to operate. Once you get your site plan, your layout, you have to have your fire certificate. Okay, now if you are building from scratch, all of those things will come in the MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing drawings so that it can be approved by the appropriate authority. You have to have, obviously, a bank account for the facility and an introductory letter introducing you to HeFRA. But last, but certainly probably not the least, is that the type of facility you hope to build is not going to operate on its own. You need personnel. You need subject matter experts. And so before you go to HeFRA, you have to at least show a minimum number of people who are going to be working at the facility. What specialty or what specialty service are you going to render? And once you get all of that, together with your equipment, what equipment are you going to have at your facility? Diagnostics, all of that. Now, if you are plan to attach imaging, then you have to go to the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, who will then give you permissions, come to inspect your facility, make sure that it meets appropriate requirements to be able to, so that you are not sort of radiation poisoning your employees. Everything has to. So these are the basic minimum requirements. And once all of that is done, HeFRA will then come to the facility. They will work with you. They will appoint an agent to work with you during the process. And that is how you make it happen. It requires a lot of preparation, site planning, meeting the EPA, fire requirement, and all of that. I'm happy to clarify anything else that may not have been touched on. Any questions? My time is up. And we are currently, because we've gone through this, we have come to be subject matter experts now. And so if anybody's planning on doing something like that, we are in a position to be able to assist you because we have gone through that. And so thank you for the opportunity. I hope I didn't deviate too much from the task ahead.
Right, thank you, Collins, for sharing your story and giving us a personal insight to the whole journey, and also the regulatory aspects. So, there was a message in the chat that we should put our questions in the Q&A box, and those questions will be addressed at the end. So we'll move on now. This is Collins telling us a story from somebody who was based in the US and setting this up. We'll move to Dr. Idem Hiaji, who's the CEO of Lister Hospital, to tell us his experience based in Ghana and getting Lister Hospital started. And we'll see whether there are any similarities or any differences between the two. So Dr. Hiaji, if you can just get your video on and unmute, we'll like to hear from you now for the next 20 or so minutes. So
Good evening.
You off, and then Dr. Hiaji can go right.
Yeah. Please.
Right there.
Good evening to all the listeners and to the Ghana College and the American group for putting this together. Thank you for the opportunity of wanting to hear my story about Lister. The background is probably similar. Two teachers, one a primary school teacher and then a training college tutor, having a son who was aspiring to do something one day. But I must say, the vision was strengthened by family, in that my father's brother was a professor of surgery in Kamfanochi in Kumasi. I used to spend time with him and saw how hard he worked and how it was appreciated. And then my maternal uncle was the late Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo of Nyaho Medical Center, who I spent time with as well. I didn't ask him how he got through it all to set up Nyaho, even though I know he worked hard, sold some properties to get the hospital going. But in 1994, when I got back from Scotland after my postgraduate, I came back with the thoughts of it is possible to build something good locally that would do a lot of work at international standards. But how do you go around that? It didn't take long for the efforts you make in the public sector to try and do something special to be identified. And so it was one of my clients' sponsor who was so appreciative of the way I handled his case. This was actually their nanny when they were a kid, had a terminal cancer, and I managed that. And he immediately asked me to take care of his family, and then introduced a lot of other friends, business friends to me. So it showed me that it was possible good work could be appreciated and could be paid for. So I set up Lister Medical Services Limited. And initially it was just a home health, and some hotels took me on to look after their clients as well. So you would do that alongside your full-time public sector job. At a point, my patients started asking to get somewhere better. So initially, I'll try and improve some of the private rooms at the police hospital where I was working, make it a little more comfortable. But I realized that no, it wasn't enough for them. So the thought came to start thinking of building a hospital. In my story, there's a lot of God factor because some things just turn out so so good by coincidence that I think there's a bit of luck there too. Because when I went to look for land, which somebody told me and took me there, the people realized they had known me already in school many years back, and so the area they had demarcated for a clinic, they gave that out to me. But then with the foresight that today I don't have money and I can only do so much. But then I quickly thought of when things are going well and you want to expand, what do you do? So I acquired residential plots alongside the clinic commercial plot that was available for the future. Now comes the funding aspect. How do you get money to do what you want to do? You start first with your business plan, and then you start going out to look for funding. But initially, the government had a small center called Empretech that could help you to get some support. So they got me an expert, or would I call him, no, he wasn't a manager, but somebody who was good with helping you to write a business plan. So he would say, okay, can I see the site? So we would go there and he would have a look at it, take note of it, then ask you, what do you want to do? What kind of hospital do you want to build? What clientele are you aiming at? How many beds do you want to be? What are the specialties you want in there? So with that, we did some business plan, which I thought was good. And I started going around to financial institutions, mostly the banks. They thought the business plan was very good, but they will tell you health is a social service, and you can be good, you can look after the people, but what about if they don't pay you? What do you do? We can't get our money back. So from bank to bank, I kept going, good promises, but all failing to accommodate your needs. However, one thing that happened was once I acquired the land, the enthusiasm to get going was so strong that I didn't know where the energy came from. I worked very hard. Any little money I got, I put into blocks and cement and iron rods and kept building. So with that, some of my clients saw the prospects of a good business coming up, and some asked to be shareholders in this. With that, then you moved further, and you kept going until I kept knocking doors at banks. They kept refusing, but one day, some company came from outside to invest in Ghana. And by some luck, it was mentioned to them that there was this doctor and a group of people who were trying to put up a hospital if they would be interested. So they came down, had a look, and were so impressed at what private people could do that they offered to provide a loan for completing the hospital. Okay, with what we had invested in already and what they wanted to provide, it wasn't going to provide every single thing to the last needle or syringe that you wanted, but it was enough to get us going. And then once you started working, you could, continue to use internally generated capital that would remain after paying to do the rest of the things that you wanted. So the land was bought in '96. We kept looking for funding. It wasn't until 2002 that OPEC agreed to provide support, but then they demanded a new business plan. So we had to now engage a first-tier auditor firm to now put a bigger document together for international level acceptance. This was also done, and fortunately, it was approved. And in 2023, I went with the board chairman at the time to Vienna to sign the loan agreement, and they started disbursing. Now, we need to go back a bit to let you know how you get the business to be impressive. During my period of postgraduate, with the vision of building a hospital one day in mind, I visited several private hospitals in Europe and anywhere else I would go, which was a developed country, and begged to be allowed to visit and begged to take a few photographs of what I saw. And so in my mind, I was, building gradually what I wanted to see of Lister one day. However, because the funding wasn't there, I had to use a local architect, showed him the photos, but we needed to tailor the design to the local needs. So we had a visit to the new parts of Kolebu, which was being done by hospital engineering, visited 37, visited Reed Hospital, have a look at space in relation to service and all that. So that's a lot of work, but if you're very determined, you make time for it. And because you know what you want at the end of the day, you can then advise and have a say in it. Now, because he was a local architect, and I wanted things done at international standards, which I couldn't afford to pay, I engaged hospital engineering, who were an international hospital construction company. They had hospitals in Europe, but then at this time they had an office based in Accra. So they would come and assess the drawings and approve or even accept the construction. So like they were supervising the construction. There again, I would say I had a God-sent support in that the hospital engineering boss was German, and my paternal uncle, who was in Confanochi, had trained in Hamburg, and they had known each other then. So for that familiarity, he supported so much with this construction. Apart from that, because they were into building hospitals, when it came to equipment sourcing, they were able to advise on what was good and usable in Ghana, in that if you got something too sophisticated out there and you brought it down, the support system may make it fail and it wouldn't work. So all that was done in a gradual process until OPEC came in, and there again they supported with some suppliers agreement, because they did supplies to other public facilities that they built. So they gave a suppliers agreement and supported with the things that the OPEC loan could not cover. They helped with some of them, and then we could pay back gradually when we started working. So it's not very easy starting and getting funding. However, once we started with the hard work and ensuring that we met repayments according to time, we did so well that OPEC came back and were very happy with how we had paid back and were ready to be part of any expansion we wanted. The expansion thoughts even started very early, because when people came in and they wanted, and they were very happy with the service that was delivered, the premises and everything, and then you send them out to go somewhere else for an MRI or CT scan, they wondered why you couldn't do that locally. So we saw that there was a demand to expand the service to cover areas that were not in the preliminary design. At this point, several banks were now interested to fund, because they saw that, oh, even though it was a health, which was a social thing, these people got funding and they were able to pay back in time. So when you start, it's very, very difficult. When you prove that you can meet the repayments, then there's more confidence in you, and they'll be then ready to provide more support. We are expanding now, hoping to cover the services that have been needed for some time. And hopefully in the next year or two, we should get our second phase completed and be able to provide a one-stop shop with other specialties involved as well. Thank you. I would leave it here so that when it comes to the Q&A, and there are more details I should provide, I will do that. My colleague who presented before has spoken about the regulatory aspects that are required with staffing, then the institutional regulatory areas as well. And we can talk about others as we go on. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing my experience. So Lista is now 20 years old this year, not 30 as thought. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Hiaji, for sharing that. And it's clear that the two presentations are complementary. I mean, Collins focused mainly on the regulatory things, and Dr. Hiaji has told us about basically the funding and the challenge of getting funding when you're starting something like this locally. So we've seen two aspects of it, and we'll now move on to the regulator. So Dr. Bano is the registrar at HeFRA. HeFRA is the body responsible for ensuring that standards are met when facilities set up. And we've heard a few things about some of the regulations. Collins went into that, but we'll get Dr. Bano to give us his perspective and probably also talk a bit about the challenges that people trying to set up health facilities in the country face, what he's seen. So Dr. Bano, we'll hand over to you now. For the next 20 minutes, if you can get your video on and unmute, then we'll move into the questions. So please keep putting your questions in the Q&A box, and once Dr. Bano finishes, we'll begin to take these questions, and our different speakers will address them. Thank you. So Dr. Bano, over to you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, yeah, we can
Yes,
hear
we
you. Go
can
ahead,
hear
sir.
you. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I think she's getting the slides ready. Very good. So that's the very first slide. Okay. So I'm glad to be invited to join all of you. This is very interesting because the information shared by other panelists are quite practical and something from their own experiences. And I'm just here to add some of the regulatory burden. Forgive me to use the word burden or requirements, and then and see how that can help you to establish your care or facility in Ghana. Please, in Ghana, doing everything is frustrating. So do not give up when you're trying to do anything in Ghana. Be very determined. Reach out to friends. Let them share the experiences with you. Also come to me. I'm a physician. I was in the diaspora. I was in the US, and somehow I dripped into coming to work for the government here in Ghana. And I'm here to help. So you reach out to me, any specific problem you have, and then we help you. So the next slide. Okay, so a bit of a background of the agency, and I'll go into some of the specific requirements as if some of which I think Dr. Collins even started talking about them. Now, HeFRA is Health Facilities Regulatory Agency. It was established in 2011. And for the first time, the government saw a need to put the regulation of both public institutions and private institutions under one roof. So you ask yourself, what was before 2011? You have to go back to 1958. Sorry for the history lessons, everybody. And so it was the 9th law passed in Second Parliament of Ghana, 1958, where they started the Private Hospitals and Maternity Homes Board, so that they placed regulation of private facilities under a board. It was assumed that public institutions, either the ministry or someone or somehow, will regulate them, until they found out, they woke up in 2011 that there was no regulator. Then they formed the HeFRA. So it was the transition, the private hospitals and maternity home board to Health Facilities Regulatory Agency. So that is a brief history. So government facilities have to come and get license, just like private facilities also have to come and get license. The good thing is that we have what I call one source code. That is, whatever standard that we say a hospital must have is the same, whether it's government or private. We did not want to make one standard for government and one standard for private. It is one standard, and that is what is uniformly applied to everybody. Next slide, please. The object of the agency, we are to license and monitor facilities that provide care, either public or private health care. Next slide, please. It's very lengthy, but I'll try and be brief here. Our we are required by law that you have received an application, consider it and approve that application for licensing. Before we do that, we must come and inspect that facility, make sure it meets certain standards. Then if it does, then we approve you for a license. Next slide. Our license can be in two forms, either a provisional license or a long-term license. So a provisional license is when you don't meet all the requirements, but we deem that you've cleared enough safety concerns or requirements, what we call critical elements. And I'll go through a few of them. If you meet them, sure, then we give you a provisional license. That is at the discretion of the registrar. And that is me talking to you. When it does not meet those safety standards, then I must take it to the board, and the board would then consider, a committee of the board would then consider whether to grant you a license or not to grant you a license. So that is how that works. Then when you get a license, then the law says that we must, the long-term license is 3 years, sorry about that. The provisional is 6 months. Now, when we give it a provisional 6 months, we have to come back every year. The law says annually to come to the facility to monitor you. And if we find anything, then we must give you 60 days to fix. Next slide. Now, okay, actually stay on here for a second. Go back a second here. The part of our object is I must determine the basic and the minimum equipment and personnel required for the type of service to be provided in a practice. So this is one of the key functions that we have to perform whenever we visit your facility. Do you have, and the keyword is the minimum equipment. That is, based on the application that you send to us, you delineate the services you want to have in that facility. And then we will go into our standards and pull for each service that you want to deliver, the minimum equipment required, the kind of personnel you need to hire to provide that service. And we'll share this with you. And then the object 4 is that we must regulate and monitor activities in the practice to determine the adequacy and the standard of healthcare provided in that facility. And this is what often creates some confusion that HeFRA is trying to do the work of Ghana Health Service. There's a lot of confusion around it. HeFRA is the regulator, and we regulate what happens within the facility. Some institutions think otherwise, especially Ghana Health Service. So we are always butting heads, but we are responsible to know what happens inside the facility. We don't have a lot of issue with the private institutions because they are used to us being around. Charge usually is not an issue, and so on and so forth. And I know when you come on board, it will not be an issue. Let's move on to the next slide. We have to collaborate with others like Medical and Dental Council. We do that often. We have done also with the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons. In fact, when we drafted our standards, we sent it to Prof. Adenu and Professor Lawson, Dr. Lawson, for them to select about 2 or 3 specialists for each standard that we have drafted, for them to go through, had their inputs before it came to HeFRA's board and before it was adopted by the minister. So that is where we are at the moment. So we collaborate with others, Pharmacy Council, and we often do with National Health Insurance. And that was something that I purposely drove that collaboration in the sense that we didn't want to license, then you take your license to health insurance and they said that we are not going to give you credentials. So we made sure that HeFRA standards includes everything, every requirement that National Health Insurance will ask of you. So that when you take your license there, should they also go back and look, you should have no problems at all. So this is an important collaboration that we have, and I'll give you more information on that. And the rest of it, I think we can move on from here. Next slide. Okay, next slide. These are the principles of quality of care. Most of you are aware of it. I don't need to bore you so much, but in all we do, we are looking for how you are addressing these issues. How is your treatment effective? That is evidence-based. Is it safe for the patient? Is it people-centered? Are you taking the patient concerns and the family's concerns into incorporating them into your treatment? And this becomes a very key factor in accreditation process. Is your care timely enough? Is it the efficient use of resources? Next paragraph, and then are you looking at access to care? Access to care, it may be an issue. Next paragraph, it may be an issue. National Health Insurance is trying to give credentialing based on where your facility is located. Though if they push it too hard on you, and then that is a problem, you can talk to me or can reach out to someone there and make a case for you that maybe it's a specialty care or there's a reason why yours has to be located here. But they try to make sure that facilities are spread out throughout the country. Is there another slide? Is there another slide? Okay, so yeah, I think we addressed about equity. Okay, the board is appointed by the president, and then the minister can put next slide, please. It must be a biomedical engineer on the board. We have people from the private sector, from the public sector, and of course we have this is a regulatory regime. You must have attorneys to make sure that the rules we make are based on, in fact, the law. Next paragraph. So licensing is the actual legal document you need to operate a facility. So if you don't have a license, it means that you don't have a legal document to operate a facility. And there are stiff penalties for operating without a license. Last year, we gave the most penalty, it was 100,000 cedis that we fined 2 facilities for that. I tried not to use this as a club or because I know running a facility is not easy. So, and I try not to push it too hard, but I do also expect people to comply. And I usually work with diasporans, so I can use that word. Know you're trying to transition into a new place is not easy. So I'm receptive to that. Next part, next slide. So in everything we do, and we are looking at these 3 things. You have the personnel to do it, you have the equipment, and you have the infrastructure. Personnel, equipment, and infrastructure. Now, I know there are a lot of people here with different background in terms of maybe from different specialties. So I've chosen a general hospital or a primary hospital, as we call it, and also general clinic to give you the requirements for this engagement. If anybody wants specific requirements for any specialty, just reach out to me and then we will share that specific requirements with you. There are about 64 different standards now. The one we're trying to work on the last time was fertility. This is a big issue now in Ghana. So fertility clinics, and we need to do better with the standards. The latest one also, because health insurance is not going to start paying for, is dialysis. Beginning January, no, I'm sorry, beginning December 1st. December 1st, I've been told, National Health Insurance will start paying for dialysis. So, but we have approved that standards more than 6 or 8 months ago, and it's available. So if anybody needs that, reach out to me if you are interested in setting up a dialysis clinic or center in Ghana. That we are happy to share with you. But it's the same principle throughout everything. You have the right personnel, you have the right equipment, and there's a place fit for purpose. And each one of them will tell who the right person is. Next slide. Oh, that's a very busy slide. Okay, next one. Next. Okay, so these are the various outpatient facilities. I won't bore you with all of them. We have the very CHIPS compound, all the way to maternity health center, clinic, general, and polyclinic. Then hospitals, we have a primary, secondary, and tertiary. Next slide. Okay, and then for laboratory, basic, primary, secondary, and tertiary imaging, the same thing from basic to tertiary, and each one of these has its own requirements. Next slide. And I think it's a general clinic is what I've put here, and it builds upon it from here. So it's meant for outpatient services. You are expected to be able to perform some basic emergency services. So you must have access to an ambulance. You don't need to have an ambulance of your own. But there must be an access to ambulance. Ghana has an ambulance now, one ambulance per every district, but it may be a very good idea to have some private arrangements. Must have access to laboratory services. This is a lab. This is a clinic, so you don't have to have your own lab, but if you do, we'll apply the basic or the primary lab standards to whatever lab you have in that clinic. But we are at least having access to laboratory services, and you're expected to all facilities that render care must report data to the Ministry of Health. It's called the DIMS, the District Health Information Management System. It's the SEC 2.0. There's now they're bringing in the LIMS, was a lightweight. Don't worry about that. When you come, we will give you the software. We help you to find it and download it so that you can report data to government. There's a penalty for not reporting to government about all patients that you see. Next slide. Okay, so there are some optional services. You can do surgery. And we say minor surgery. There's whenever I get here, the surgeons will always argue, what is minor surgery? So at HeFRA, we say that which requires local anesthesia. Some of the surgeons want there to be regional blocks and other things. So we give you examples of what we mean by a minor procedure. So certainly not by general anesthesia. We are not saying that will not be what we consider as minor surgery, because you cannot keep patient in there beyond 23 hours. And next slide. So it goes further in here. If it requires spinal and field blocks, then we will certainly require you to have a CRA at least there. So this is for the surgeons who want to do a few more surgeries in the outpatient. You can do family planning and also maternal care. Next slide. Optional services, again, there are specific ones. So if we're not going to go into that, there's no need to talk about dental and ophthalmic. And when you request, we'll give them to you. We have all those standards available. Again, you have primary lab that's expected if you want to provide labs, other imaging, pharmacy services, and again, 23 hours observation and not beyond that, because we don't want you beyond that is admission, and we frown upon that. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so this is the hospital now. Very good. Now, so for hospital, there are 5 basic services that you must provide. First, you must have an A&E, which is 24 hours. And even though we are not required to have a specialist to treat everybody that comes in there, but trauma or some surgical stabilization, medical, obstetric, pediatric, and psychiatric emergencies. These services need not be done by a specialist. So the same generalist that is there can attend all of this. It is stabilized and transferred. But those are so the emergency care must be delivered. We expect you to also do obstetric care, then do pediatric care, then provide the care for the medical and the surgical patient. So these are the 5 that is required. Now, I know some go beyond that, and whatever specialty care or whatever care you provide, we just pick up the standard and apply. But these are the 5 basic services that a hospital must provide. In addition to that, there must be inpatient care. Inpatient care, so we have a surgical suite, full surgical suite with recovery room and HDU, ICU. And then again, we do not think that you can provide all that care without any lab at all. So we expect you to have a primary lab in a hospital. So by primary lab, we mean that you must be able to do chemistry, hematology, microbiology, plus or minus microscopy. And you must hire someone with a first degree who can do the instrumentation and everything and run it properly for you in a hospital. Again, this focusing on a primary hospital. If you want to do any specialty hospital, we have the standards for the pediatric hospital. Orthopedic has a focus hospital. Now people are asking for cancer hospital. Whichever you want to do, you talk to us. We probably have the standard to build around it for you. But I just picked the primary hospital to give you a flavor or introduction to how the landscape looks like. So the 5 basic services as I mentioned, plus the laboratory and the imaging. So you need to have at least ultrasound and X-ray. That is the imaging required. In terms of diagnostics, we are requiring you to have an ECG or EKG for the other things. So these are the very minimum that is required, and for you to have a primary hospital and to get going. In addition to that, we say it must be 40 bed minimum. And then we are going to the physician. 3 doctors. Again, we get a lot of fight about that. But 3 doctors, we do mean that. We want 1 doctor to be responsible for all the outpatient care that comes in. And that same doctor will be responsible for the emergency care. And that same doctor is responsible for administrative requirements. They want 1 being inpatient, that is doing the surgeries or those admitted, rounding on all those patients that were admitted overnight or the previous night. And we want a 3rd doctor to be home and resting. And he comes in around 4 or 5 or in the evening to cover the emergency unit and everybody that is in the hospital. So that is, since we are physicians, I'll leave that one there. The requirement for pharmacists, I think it's 2 of them, 1 in the day, 1 in the evening. And nurses, I'll mention it because it's usually about, we say 25 nurses for a 40-bed facility. If we are not able to get 40 beds and for some reason you have fewer beds, again, state a reason in your application and why we should consider you, and we do that also for you. I will just touch briefly on secondary facility. The requirements has been 10 specialty. You must be able to offer 10 specialty care up through December of this year. Beginning January is going to 15 specialty care. So 15 specialty care, at least 5 of them being medical, 5 of them being surgical. There are other ones that the committee has selected, like having a radiologist, having anesthesia, having a pathologist. And you do your best and you talk to me if we are going in that range. You have a minimum bed capacity now. You've changed that from 80 to 240 bed capacity. And now not likewise, the tertiary one has also gone up. So I will I'll talk to you later. I think it's going from 20 to 30. Must have 30 specialists and subspecialists to get that license. But I know most of you probably are not looking at that yet. But I've given information mainly on the primary hospital. There are more optional services here that you have to access the CT scan on MRI, optional dental lab. Okay. Of course, CSSD and laundry is a requirement, rehab, access to ambulance. Again, these are all standard requirements. So let me go to and address probably the requirements at the beginning, what everybody must have before, okay. So all these are optional services on this slide. You don't have to have them. But if you do, we have the standard there for you that would apply. I wouldn't want to scare you with the offenses now. So we can skip this now and then you can just listen to me. The initial requirements include that you must have your business registered. It was called Registrar General. Now the name has changed. I think it's the Office of the Registrar of Companies. Office of the Registrar of Companies. I think that's the name has changed. So you must go there, then register the company you're trying to form. I will advise that you first come to HeFRA to make sure that the name that you are going to pick is appropriate. Because occasionally we've asked people to go back, change the name. Someone who put a hospital in the name, and then what they will build initially is not a hospital, but it's a clinic. But then the name is confusing to the public. So we will try, I advise that before you go and register the name, come talk to me or one of the directors, see what you are trying to do, and see if you can reasonably match. The most of the time, the issue with picking the name of a hospital, then you come into a facility that doesn't meet the standard of a hospital, and then we asking you to go back and re-register, register that name or pick a different name. Then it'll be a waste of time and a waste of resource and things. So talk to us before you do that. And that registration is a requirement. That means that now you have a separate legal personality, a separate legal entity. You have to be an entity in order to come in to get a license. So that is a very important requirement. Now, when you come to get that, the law requires that you get a fire certificate, as Dr. Collins mentioned. You must get an EPA certificate. You must have a bank. It is not something elaborate. We are not interested in how much money you have in the bank, but so that you have a banking relationship. So you can have the banker write to us, or you may even accept your manager telling us who your banker is. Government requires us to have that. You must have the district assemblies have their own requirements that you have to meet, because we're going to locate this facility within the district, and they also, but most of the requirements overlap. So if you have the fire certificate, EPA certificate, most often that's the requirement they're going to ask of you, and we are good to go. We need a layout of the building. We don't need a fancy one that you have to get an architect's drawing. It can be a draftsman's drawing where your facility layout is. The key thing is that is where there's fire issue, where are the people supposed to exit? So you must clearly know the route for exit, assembly point where people are safe to go, and everybody must know that must be on the drawing. Your sprinkler system for water and things, it's all part of the fire certificate, but it's mainly safety issue that we are very much interested in. And then those who are going to do x-rays, you must have a certificate from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Both x-ray and CT scan, you do need to have that. Ultrasound, you don't need to have from them. What else? I think those are the initial documents that you must have. And of course, the concept of provider in charge is so key with HeFRA. Quality begins with that individual. And what the concept is that that person must be sufficiently trained and knowledgeable to run everything that happens in that facility. That is the whole point. We don't think that you should grant a license to someone to perform procedures beyond the person's competence or training. I think all of you here will agree with that. That is a reasonable standard to have. So we say for primary hospital, a GP is okay because we don't expect specialty range of services to be provided. When you get to secondary facilities, which is our referral facilities, 10, minimum of 10 now, soon going to 15, then there must be a specialist in charge. That's the standard we have. And when you go to tertiary level, we say it must be a consultant, a senior specialist in charge. That concept runs through with everything we do. Even if you go to the lab, we will tell you if it's a basic or primary lab, it must be a first degree scientist. But when you get into flow cytometry, frozen sessions and whatnot, we will ask that you have a specialist in charge or someone with advanced degree. The concept is still the same. Whatever occurs in the facility, the person in charge of it must be sufficiently trained to supervise what occurs there. It's just a basic thing. And then we have a minimum number of people you have in order to provide that care safely. And I think with that, I will end my talk here and wait for any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Bano, and thanks to all our presenters. So for the attendees, the way this webinar is set up, you probably wouldn't be able to speak to ask your question. I see a hand being raised. So would advise you to type your question in the Q&A box, and then we'll begin to get those questions to our presenters for them to address. So I think one big thing that has come out from Dr. Bano's presentation is that HeFRA is available to provide guidance. Like he said, I mean, before you get something started, come over to HeFRA, talk to one of the directors or talk to him, and you'd get the appropriate guidance. And I'm sure these slides can also be shared afterwards. So we'll look at the questions. We've got about 21 questions in the chat box, and there's one with for I think Dr. Kwating for Collins, which was asking about I can't see it now, about why there was the resistance from the hesitance from the banks in supporting when you started out. I know Dr. Hinaji also talked a bit about that and gave some background to the behavior of the banks. But Collins, you want to give some more background on your experience with the banks also?
Yes. Yeah, and thank you to the other presenters, Dr. Ahiaji. I mean, it is really a pleasure to actually get to meet you for the first time over here. I'm looking forward to future collaborations, and also thank you, Dr. Bano. So yes, I wanted to do this way back in 2003 when I started medical school, because I had a vision to want to do that. And so I started asking around, not having any experience with funding. And so the ones I heard about and read about during my research were OPEC, the US Exim Bank, that is the Export and Import Bank, and other institutions. And so whenever I approached them, they just didn't see the need. First and foremost, it was that general look at Africa, as a place. When people want to go to Africa, they want to put money in something that will give them a very quick return on investment. And as you may have heard from Dr. Hiaji's presentation, they don't initially see you as a profitable venture, and they don't want to put money in an area where they don't think they will get their money back. So that was basically the resistance I experienced. Like, why should you? I mean, I can't tell you how much money I would say wasted. I've wasted getting people to write me business plans because I have absolutely no formal business training background. So I will have to approach somebody with an MBA, and they'll pull all of these online resources, present, uh, you know, uh, projections. But then when you go, they'll tell you, look, we know the country is mostly poor, they are uninsured. You are asking to get money to go and build a cardiovascular facility. So suppose a farmer shows up at your facility, stenting somebody here, putting one stent in costs over 25 to $30,000 just to place a single stent. But we know healthcare is unnecessarily expensive in the United States. Mostly the responses I got was because of their ignorance, comparing a US facility to a facility planned for Ghana. The reason things are very expensive, as you all know, is just because that is just the way the system is. And so when they think about their experiences here in the States and they project that onto Africa, they couldn't see where they were going to get return on their investment. And so some of the specific statements I got was, I mean, who wants to dump money in that quote unquote that you can delete the expletives. So those were mostly, and then a place like Exim Bank will say, well, we don't do green projects. Okay, they call it brown and green. Green just means that you can't just show up with a business plan and expect us to go build a foundation and start building a facility. And so that is what eventually made me move away from wanting to build that facility from scratch and went to acquire a property that I could develop and modify to meet. So that was basically some of the challenges.
Right. Okay, thank you, Collins. There's another question here about how you balance or structure your professional life between Ghana and the US, because you're clearly a busy physician in the US. How do you kind of like balance that? And the last question there for you would be whether there were any other challenges apart from the funding, and what would you have done differently?
Well, I'll take the last question first before the balancing of the life question. So yes, there were a ton of challenges. As Dr. Hiaji mentioned, and I think maybe Dr. Bana, doing things in Ghana is extremely frustrating. I'm not the one with the temperament to tolerate BS, but most of what I got was a lot of BS. Um, you know, the the statement money talks and BS walks is real in Ghana. Okay. If everybody did what they were supposed to do or being paid to do, our life will be extremely, smooth. But we will go mostly, my project manager will go to like a local authority. They know what they are supposed to do, and they will tell you, look, the real application costs 200 Ghana cedis, but there are so many of them ahead of you that it's going to take us practically 6 months to get to you. When they start from that, you know which angle they are going. In other words, pay us money, or we are not going to get you cleared. And so those were some of the frustrations. Like you go to the local assembly, before you can modify or build a facility, you have to go to the district assembly. There are engineers or people who are supposed to be engineers who come to the site. You are supposed to, send soil sample testing to make sure that the structure you are putting up will meet requirements. When you go there, they will tell you, look, unless you pay this amount of money, you're literally not going to get a clearance. So those were some of the hindrances and obstacles that we had to sort of navigate. And so more kudos to my project manager. She didn't back down. She, worked every lead, used every available resources at her disposal to make that done. To get that done. So that is the last question first. How I'm balancing my professional career between here, life, and between here and in Ghana. So before I decided to get this thing done, I had to sort of sit with family. I had already committed that I was going to go to Ghana to do this. It is something that I had always wanted to do, and those who have really gotten to know me, I've been talking about going to Ghana to do something for a very, very long time. I've gone through different iterations of trying to convene a group to get this thing done on many occasions, planning over a decade. Ever since I joined GPSF way back in the 2009, 2010 area, thereabout, I've been wanting to do this. But that realization really hit home when, some friends, personal family members lost their lives. In my opinion, to something that could have readily been solved. And so I made a commitment that I wasn't going to wait until I was old and decrepit before I moved back to Ghana. So to answer the question, I have decided to relocate completely. Because construction is not 100% done yet, I'm still here working. But the plan will be to relocate and do this full time in Ghana. 60 plus years after independence, I just cannot fathom that somebody shows up with an acute MI that could have easily been addressed and they die waiting for care. And so that is what my commitment in the next phase of my professional career is going to be. It's going to be dedicated to helping train the young up and coming, and they are very, very smart people coming up, both men and women, young women. Since I started this and started talking about it, I have received a lot of requests for mentorship. And I think there are MOUs, collaborations with the current leadership back at home, our prof included, to start a training program. And I'm very, very excited about what the future holds that we can do for the next generation of our providers. And that is what my dedication is going to be. Yes, I have children here who have told me they are not moving back to Ghana. So I'm not holding my hopes up. Hopefully they will visit, but my commitment will be to relocate. So when the project begins, when construction is done and every equipment is turned on, my bags are already packed. Yes, I'll come back to do the minimum requirement to maintain my licensing and certification. But the next phase of my professional career, until I lay down my stethoscope, is going to be in Ghana.
Thank you, Collins. Dr. Haji, there's a comment here saying that there's one of the speakers who says the impression that they got was that your success had to do with initial crowdfunding along with your own resources until you got to the point where an investor saw the potential. Would you agree with that, or would you like to modify that a bit?
Please come again. The initial.
The impression is that your success at you first had initial crowdfunding, kind of like getting different people to put money in. You added your sources. Then things got to the point where an investor saw the potential and brought external funds in. So
Yeah.
that's exactly the picture. Is there something you'd like to clarify?
Oh, that's exactly it. I did mention that when the banks were turning me down, I was getting some of my clients who saw the potential to invest in the business. And so work kept going. We never stopped working. So at each stage, somebody who came and saw what was there was more impressed, and then we will be ready to put in an investment. Yes. So the gradual processing of being determined to continue, despite the failure of the banks to give you a huge fund, meant that you were showing positivity and determination. And this actually was what made the OPEC fund excited at the stage they came in to see what was on the ground. At that point, they were ready to invest in the company.
Okay, thanks. There's another question. Somebody's asking you to throw some light on insurance for private healthcare delivery business in Ghana. How do you go about it? What are the challenges from your experience?
Okay. Yeah. I remember when we first opened, the then head of the NHI brought the wife and wondered if I would subscribe to the NHI so that I would get a lot of people to come in. But one thing I made clear to him was that it wasn't just numbers that I was looking for, but I was looking for people who appreciated a very good service and were prepared to pay for it, because the overheads are huge. Managing your electricity, your water, ensuring that water is running all the time. This meant, investing in boreholes, getting 2 generators in addition to your main ECG supply. So when one fails, the other one is there to back up, just to keep the service going. So I would say that even with insurance, it's not every insurance company that finds you affordable, in that they have different premiums. So those who are prepared to get a good and excellent service are ready to come on. But those who just want to enroll people on low premium may not be able to come on. So that is it. But we've been talking to the insurance companies over some time now regarding payment of works done. Initially, some of them would take so long to pay you back, but then once you start holding back the service to their people and they go back to complain, then they start doing better. So that also takes some getting used to, and we are having dialogue with them for a mutually beneficial agreement, so they can continue to have their top people come get premium service, and then also make sure that they pay us back early enough to be able to plow back into the business.
Right. Thank you. So, Dr. Bano, there's some. I'll pick some questions for you. I'm not taking the questions in the order. So if your question has been jumped, don't worry. I just want to get each one of the speakers to respond. Dr. Bano, there's a question here about whether there are any government incentives for building a quality primary healthcare facility in rural areas. Are you able to address that?
Thank you, Prof, for the question. When you go to meetings and you have been part of it, there's always NHIA paying for being asked to pay for quality of care. And so that discussion is always on the table, but I don't think government is implementing the policy yet. So
Okay.
it is. I would like to add one or two from my experience at NHI, and it's regarding the financing. If I could just mention that. First and foremost, the private health insurance market in Ghana, from what I recall, is less than 3% of the market. So it's not a very huge market. So I'll really, what should I say, appeal to those who are coming to Ghana, weigh all the market, do the market research and everything, but please consider NHIA for a couple of reasons. Government pays over 100 million cedis every month. So somebody is getting paid. Okay, so maybe I don't know what you may have heard, but do not close the door on NHIA. Note that government pays almost double the rate to public institutions, to private institutions. So if a procedure costs 100 cedis and you're in the private sector, you may even get double because they take your overhead and other things into consideration, and it's part of the pricing mechanism. I'm not aware of too many people in the private sector who have gone on national health insurance and they cannot wait to get off. I mean, and I used to be in charge of the e-claims. There were people, everybody, they wouldn't get off because that money was worth it. One thing I'll add, and I'll stop. Once on NHIA, you get better interest rate loans from the banks. You get at least 2, 3, 4, 5% reduction in the rate. In exchange for that, you allow them to take money from NHIA reimbursement. There's an arrangement there. That is one aspect. There's another fund called Medical Credit Fund. That is also advanced by one of the, it's backed by one of the DPs, developmental partners. And they only work with you if you have NHIA account. And it's a similar arrangement. And the interest rate is not as bad. So definitely if you're in the diaspora, the interest rate they are much, much better, 3, 4, 5%. If you can get a loan and bring it to Ghana, that's probably the best. But remember, that is in dollars. In Ghana here, it is much higher. But there are ways to have something reduced. But the two instances I know are all through the NHI. Thank you.
Right. Then, Dr. Bano, there's another question here about the inspection of the facility. That after a facility gets the license, how often is the facility inspected?
Thank you. Inspection will be every 3 years,
Okay.
unless you had a provisional. Then that means there were some deficiencies. Then we are required to come back in 6 months. There's annual monitoring that we will do, but it's not as robust as inspection.
Okay. Now, the last ones for you, Dr. Bano, is that there are in the optional services, you mentioned herbal units. We'd like to know how you regulate these herbal units and whether HeFRA is also responsible for regulating services where they deliver just some ultrasound scan services. Because the person put the question there says from his or her experience, there are a number of ultrasound providers who are not doing a good job. So the herbal and then the ultrasound. Yeah.
Okay, yes, very good. It's the policy of government to incorporate herbal medicine in the orthodox medical care. So here we are. So it's more, you see that often in some government facilities. And the herbal part is regulated by the Traditional Medicine and Practice Council. There's a whole regulator for that. Our role is where they are using orthodox devices, equipment, and whatnot, the physical infrastructure. Then when we are licensing the facility, we look at all of that. But with respect to the HeFRA practices, there's a TMPC, and they have a new registrar just appointed within the last 6 or 8 months that is responsible for that. That's the HeFRA. And what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
About facilities that provide
Ultrasound scans, and sorry, I'm touching. Go ahead.
Yeah, so whether you regulate them also and how you go about that.
Yes, ultrasound imaging and laboratory regulation are under HeFRA. And you are right, there's proliferation of some of these facilities, and we do our best to bring them so that they can do a better job. It is a problem. They don't. So we need to tighten up the regulatory framework. We are at the point where, and then Prof, you have to help us. If we demand that they should have a radiologist before they can open one, then they will also complain that we are being too restrictive, because as you know, there are not that many radiologists trained out there. So as at the moment, you don't have to be a radiologist to own one of these imaging, ultrasound or X-ray. We hope that you have an arrangement with the radiologist who will read these images before they are sent to the patient's provider. So it's a matter of, there's a lot of radiographers and a lot of sonographers out there being trained, and not enough radiologists trained to supervise the thing. That's what the issue is.
Right. Okay, thank you. I mean, there are a number of questions I've not been able to get to. It's almost 9 p.m. here in Accra, and the plan was to end this at 9. One thing that's been recurring is people would like to get in touch with our speakers. I wouldn't like to put them on the spot here and ask them whether their contact can be shared, but I guess the GPSF Secretariat would send an email to our speakers asking for their permission to share their contact. And once we get that permission, it will be shared with those who participated. Fran will talk us to whether that's a practical thing to do for the participants. We can share those contacts. And as for the slides, we can get the slides and share them with everybody. And so with this, Fran, I'll hand over to you for you to take it off from here. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you so much. I do have Dr. Banner's slides, so I'll get his permission and share it with our membership as well as the contact information, if it is okay with them. I'd like to thank you all for joining today. Before we close out, as Prof said, we have our conference coming up. I'm going to share our flyer in 1 second. Our annual conference is coming up. It is May 16th and 17th of next year of 2025. And the conference theme this year is antimicrobial stewardship in the face of emergent infectious diseases, the role of the healthcare provider. So again, May 16th to 17th, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. This year.
The slide has moved out of view, the flyer.
Yeah. Are you not seeing it? Okay, let me try that again. Thank you for letting me know. How about now? Can you see it?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. So it's in Atlanta, Georgia. As you all see on the flyer, we will send this flyer out. This year we have some perks. We are able to provide discounted airfare for those that are traveling out of the state or out of the country to come to the conference. Registration for the conference will open on January 1st, and we'll send that information out as well. If you have any questions, if you're interested in submitting an abstract, please email GhanaPhysiciansUSA@gmail.com, and we will answer your questions and provide any additional information that is needed. If you have any additional questions that were not answered today, again, send an email to that same email address, and we'll try to send them to the panelists to get them answered. Thank you all again for joining. It is 9 o'clock and pretty late in Ghana. Thank you all, our panelists, for your insights, for your stories, for just all of the great information that you shared today. Thank you again, Prof, for moderating this session. And we will have our next session around February of next year. We'll provide some additional information as time goes along. I bid you all good night and thank you again for joining today.
All right, thank you. And thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Pleasant week to you all.